Let's talk now, however, to our good friend Mr. Nick Freeman, who often talks to us about the issues of motorists and the strange laws that keep being brought in, the overpowering benefits being given to cyclists who still have yet to be registered or insured, and of course some of the more, shall we say, extreme cyclists, like this one particular character, Mike van Erp. 50 years of age. He's a Dutch national, apparently. He's known as Cycling Mikey. He goes around basically trying to catch motorists out, trying to film them doing things they shouldn't. But he's currently in a courtroom case where he's suffered a rare setback. Let's talk to Nick and find out what's going on. Nick, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike. I am struggling to hear you. I don't know whether you can possibly get the volume turned up, but I literally, I can
try and get our technical people to do that.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you absolutely fine,
okay,
so don't worry about that.
Just about hear you. So.
Okay, well, let's talk first of all about Cycling Mikey. This is a guy who goes around filming people in their cars, doing things supposedly they're not supposed to be doing, like using their phones. He's gone after quite a few celebrities, but he's now been sort of more or less told that he effectively jumped on front of a car, jumped on the bonnet of a car, filmed himself, claimed that he was being attacked by the car driver, and a jury has now acquitted the guy he was accusing of doing all that.
Yeah, he's one of several militant cyclists in London, and this isn't the first time that he has actually, in order to try and capture his prey, cycled in a dangerous manner. But the difficulty, of course, at the moment is that laws in relation to cycling have no teeth. So if you're a dangerous driver, you get punished, you might go to prison, you're going to be disqualified. If you're a dangerous cyclist, there's not a great deal that's going to happen to you. And there are very, very few prosecutions, literally, if any. So he feels that he is free to cycle the streets of London, cycling in a dangerous manner to catch his prey. And this time, someone stood up to him and said, no, I'm not having it. And obviously, they've won. This may or may not stop him in the future. I doubt it. He's on a crusade. And at the end of the day, we have to remember, as far as the motorists are concerned, you know, they shouldn't be using their phone in their car. It's a shame possibly there aren't more police on the streets, and it's a shame that actually the police encourage people like this gentleman, because he's doing their job for them. And I think he's had thousands of convictions and raised an awful lot of money. So there's two sides to the argument, but he can never be excused from cycling dangerously. Hopefully, he's learned a lesson. And what we need, Mike, as you and I both well know, is for a change in the cycling law, so that cycling law has some teeth, so that they will be punished in the same way as the motorist is punished. And that hasn't happened yet. And this government obviously has bigger problems, bigger fish to fry at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I have had many conversations about this, but a lot of these sort of extremist cyclists, if you like, have these cameras fitted to their helmets. They film everything that they do. They try to catch people out, and so they've been driving dangerously. So it's not just about people using phones. But, you know, I've had, probably since the last time you and I had this conversation, probably at least 10 incidents where cyclists have almost crashed into me, or have, you know, have shouted abuse at me, have ridden across me, have not used cycle lanes when they were prepared to pay, when we're all prepared to pay for the cycle lanes to be put in. You know, it's still absolute mayhem out there.
Well, it's mayhem, and the starting point, of course, is identification. What you see is people cycling dangerously, fantastic. With a car, you have a process, a registered number. With a bicycle, what do you have? Absolutely nothing other than someone cycling dangerously. And it staggers me that the government, trying to encourage cycling, isn't going to grasp this and say, we do need to have a system whereby we're going to hold them to account. They can no longer cycle with impunity. It's a healthy way forward, but let's take everyone and make them responsible for what they do and accountable. And once we do that, cycling will become much safer.
Absolutely right. And I have noticed as well an increase in the number of scooters for hire on the streets, certainly of London and other cities, I think, as well around the country. But what I've also noticed is some of these new scooters, which have got different branded names on them, have a little registration plate on the back of them. People said to us, did they not, oh, where are you going to put a registration plate? Well, they've got a little number on them so you can identify them.
Well, it's tiny. It's not registered to DVLA. You know, if they're cycling, if they're scooting on the pavement, if they're going to be involved in criminal activity, would you be able to see it? That they move very quickly. In my view, it needs to be of a certain dimension so that it's always visible, or they need to wear some sort of registration on a tabard on their clothing. There needs to be something that's highly visible in the same way that mopeds have them. So again, you have law in place for e-scooters, but there's a difficulty in enforcing it. One, because there are literally tens, hundreds of thousands of illegal ones on our roads, but also you don't at any one time really know who's using them, and that's the problem.
Yes. And the final story to talk about this morning, a guy by the name of James Sheridan Vigor given a £130 fine for pulling into a bus lane to let an ambulance go past when its blue lights were flashing. I mean, surely to God, they should reverse that.
Shame on the council. And, of course, it's important to remember this isn't criminal, it's civil. This is the council's responsibility. It's the legislation they put in place, the laws that they put in place. What is actually interesting is, even from a criminal perspective, if a police officer comes up behind you in his car with his lights flashing, you don't have to move over. And if you, for example, go through red lights, prima facie, you're committing an offence. So in my view, what needs to happen, and it's so obvious, we shouldn't need to have this conversation, but councils need to be held to account, and they need, if they're not going to use their discretion, they need to be able to say, when there's an emergency, such as it could be a life and death situation, if you can't use your common sense, the government need to take control and say, right, councils are not going to be able to have the power to have this sort of law whereby people who move in to allow emergency vehicles through are going to be able to impose financial penalty. They need to be stripped of that power. And at the same time, the government needs to introduce law so that people will not be going, for example, breaking the law, going through a traffic light or going through a stop line, committing another road traffic offence, because you actually don't have a defence. I'm not suggesting you would be prosecuted, but there are cases where there are. You'd have what's called a special reason to not endorse your licence, but it's not a defence. So again, this is a bit of a lacuna, a loophole, if you like. The law needs tightening up, it needs sorting out.
It really does.
What's interesting about this, Mike, is he went through an appeal procedure. He didn't exhaust the appeal procedure, but the council only withdrew the penalty because there was such a huge public protest. And the law shouldn't work that way. We're not living in one of these dictatorships in other countries. I'm not going to mention the type. We're living in a democracy. We need to have sensible legislation.
Even in Waltham Forest, it has to be said, which is the council involved. Nick, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Nick Freeman there. I mean, the problem with all of this is that if you are sitting in a car and next to you is a bus lane, you tend, I mean, I certainly tend not to move. Because if the ambulance is coming up behind me, he can go into the bus lane and go around me. But I'm not going to move into the bus lane because I know what's going to happen. They're going to give me a fine. And that's not a good thing to do, is it? It's not a good place to be.